Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ella, and as you can see in the title, today we're going to talk a little bit about poisonous plants and how you can build a relationship with them, my experiences with them, and also at the very end of this video I'll be showing you my favorite books on the topic that I suggest as reading material. Also, I got a microphone because the audio really bothered me, so I hope that's going to be okay. Now I do have a couple of notes on my phone that I'll be continuously checking so that I'm not forgetting anything because my memory is just non-existent. Okay, so how did I start working with poisonous plants or the nightshade family? What was interesting to me, and like how do you start that? You know, because it's such a slightly intimidating path to be walking, considering that you're working with deadly nightshades. You're working with plants that could kill you, or at the very least it could give you, you know, trauma. It could really severely harm you to a point where it could leave long-lasting impairments if you don't know what you're doing. I also don't want to like fluff this video up because it's a very serious video, it's a very serious subject. So if that is something that you are interested in, then obviously the first thing that I actually did was I just read a lot. I read a lot about it in theory. That's kind of what I tend to do with most of my witchcraft practice, is I do like a lot of preliminary reading. Now another thing that I will say is I had some amazing people that I was also able to chat about that gave me continuous tips, that kind of had previous experiences that they were able to share with me. And I feel like, you know, a lot of these people have Patreons. I myself have a Patreon where I will be talking more in depth about certain topics as well. One of them is actually how to make a flower essence. Now a flower essence is a great gateway drug, that's the word that I was looking for. They are a great way to work with these plants, and the only safe way that you're able to work with these plants. And I suggest that that is a great one to look for if you want to get into this plant relationship without potentially risking your life. So I obviously started with reading books. Now, honestly, that's kind of how my interest in the first place peaked. I read a book by Corinne Boyer, Plants of the Devil. I love that book. It's pretty thin and it's really easy to go through. I read it within 2 days and it's like one of my favorite all-time favorite books in general in witchcraft. And that one really was just like so influential. Also, personally, I take a really big interest in Spirit Flight and the Witch's Sabbath, which there's a lot of overlap if you're working with poisonous plants and the Witch's Sabbath, and in general, to be honest, with old witch lore, to the point where you start reading and you realize how much witchcraft actually is connected to poisonous plants or the art of poisoning, and how often they were related to each other, how often poisoners were seen as witches, how often oracles used these poisonous plants, or how often seers used these plants. A lot of these plants have deep connections with ancient, like truly ancient witchcraft lore, old pagan pre-Christian lore. Again, you know, like the Oracle of Delphi was said to use henbane to have visions. Mandrake is super prominent throughout. Hildegard of Bingen, for example, is the first one to actually discuss mandrake as a plant of the devil. Fun fact. And it's just such an amazing rabbit hole that you can really get into and read about a lot. And so that's what I suggest you to do. Get into that rabbit hole, just, you know, dive right in. It's gonna be a lot of reading, but it's like really exciting reading, and I feel like you feel like that crazy map person, you know, you're just like, oh my god, there's a connection and here's a connection. And I love that. I personally love when you get into a topic and you realize all these, I guess, you know, you could call them like synchronicities, or you could just call them like this like red thread, golden thread that is just connecting everything, and you start seeing like the full puzzle piece. And I love that, and I feel like this is a really rewarding path if that is what you are into, to be honest, to a point where even just theoretical knowledge is amazing to have on the subject. And yeah. Now, if you are wanting to then seriously start diving into working with these plants directly. Again, flower essence are going to be, in my opinion, the only safe way and the only way that I can actually suggest, that I want to recommend for legal reasons. Don't sue me. That's the only one that I'm going to, at least here on this public channel, going to be really discussing. If you want some other more in-depth ones, then head over to my Patreon. I'll be making a follow-up video, probably, you know, next week or something like that. Look out for that if you are a Patreon member already, where I'm going to talk a little bit more about working with these plants in a way that is not flower essences. And even there, if you're working with poisonous plants, in my opinion and my experience, I there even suggest to then only take a single drop and have that on your wrist. I would not do the under the tongue method until you already have a little bit of an understanding what this does. Especially also, that's another thing, if you don't use alcohol, you can use other substances too. You can Google that. But personally, I would just be on the super safe side and just do that. Now, if you don't have those plants, there's people online that you're able to purchase these from. Now, I will say, there's a little bit of trickiness going on here online. There's some drama in the poison path community. Certain people seem reputable, but then you kind of realize that they are selling illegal substances, or they're not very, the processes that they use is not really a good method, let's say, right? Like certain plants, you're not supposed to boil them, or you're not supposed to directly boil them, for example, and then you see that they are using that method. And you know, there's just like a couple of like questionable things going on, and because it is such a dangerous substance to be working with, this is something that you really need to do your research on and really look up these people, you know, like just a quick Google. Reddit, good old Reddit, a lot of times is really great for this. Or you can also, of course, message myself, you know, just hop on those DMs and ask like, hey, is this a reputable source? I'm not gonna know everyone, of course. The one that I really recommend, especially in the US, is Banefolk. They are an amazing resource in general. What a great educational person they are as well, but they are a great one if you want to be in the US and you would like to have a source. Personally, I'm going to actually include flower essences in my shop very soon as a little bit of a spray, so it's not under the tongue, just because of German legalities being really annoying. But yeah, so that's one way. Now, if you are wanting to actually plant these plants, if you are actually trying to get into working with these plants directly, then again, Banefolk has great seeds. Magic Garden Seeds has seeds. They are in Germany, and that way you can start working with a plant directly. Now, here it's going to start getting interesting, because we're going to start actually working with a plant that is incredibly poisonous, it's incredibly dangerous. And so a couple of things that you need to consider when doing that is always wear gloves. You know, no glove, no love. Works with the nightshade family too. I personally am incredibly sensitive to these plants, to the point where I start feeling the effects just by like touching them with my bare hands. If I touch, for example, the leaves, if I want to trim the plant, then I need to be wearing gloves, because I will feel the effects immediately. And I'll go into story time mode in a little bit, but you need to be wearing gloves. You need to make sure that you are not planting this anywhere where children are accessible to, where random people potentially would be accessible to and thinking, oh, that looks like a beautiful berry, like a blueberry, let me eat that. Don't do that. Animals, certain animals, especially pets, are really not supposed to get anywhere near these plants. So these are things to consider, and these are going to be in a way probably, you know, natural, kind of like sifting through who should be working with these plants or not. And I know that sounds really harsh, but if you are not able to keep plants of this nature in a safe environment in a way that is responsible, then you should not be keeping these plants, at least at the very time being. You know, you can always work with them in the future if your circumstances change, but if you have an apartment or you're sharing your living space with roommates, or you know, with pets and things like that, you should not be keeping this plant. I know that that might suck, but that's just, you know, the responsible thing to be saying and to be doing. That's just, it be like that sometimes. You know, I'm not gonna like pretend recommend. And then essentially once you've got these plants planted, you obviously are able to work with these in various ways. Now, books are going to be a great resource. It's going to be a great resource if you have people that you're able to talk to about with these, you know, what you can do with these plants. You should have a general idea what you want to do with them, or of course if you just want to work with the spirit and you just like keeping these plants and you're not planning to process them in any way and you just like having the spirit around, that's a wonderful way to obviously experience them as well. Now, an interesting thing is, how do you actually get into a relationship with these plants? To be honest with you, the moment, especially from seed, the moment that you see these plants grow, you get like maternal instincts. You get like, oh my god, my little baby, you've already grown this much, you know? And then they've got their first leaves and you're just like, oh my god, my baby's got leaves. It develops really naturally, to be honest with you. Especially once you then start taking care of them and you realize what they like and what they don't like. For example, nightshades really hate direct sunlight, and like direct heat, hate it. They like the warmth, but they like to be in the shade a little bit, nightshades, you know? And then you realize, oh, you know, for example, the datura, they bloom at night. So you start developing a little bit of like a routine. Or you realize, oh, you know, this plant here is like, it's going to really spread. Like, for example, belladonna. You start realizing where a lot of the folklore comes from just by working with these plants. So for example, belladonna, it's a seductress, but she'll also choke you out. Like, she'll choke anyone else out. She's great, she's really beautiful, but she's also really great if you are working with in that realm of like love and possessiveness a little bit, you know, like hypnoticism, of course. You've really got belladonna over here. So you start having like a relationship in that way a lot of times. And then also dreams. We cannot forget dreams. For me personally, dreams, especially with the nightshade family, because they are so connected to the dream world with the liminal world. They are going to really be there and present in your dreams if you're starting to work with them, where I would have dreams about these plants. Henbane, for example, she actually told me how to make a flower essence of her, how she would like me to make that flower essence. She showed me in a dream, and it was like a really vivid dream, and I have a dream diary and everything, right? And so that was a really amazing experience too. I also, with specifically henbane, did a spirit journey meditation. You can either do a guided meditation that you see on YouTube, for example, or you know, if you are a meditator anyway, then you likely already kind of know how to do that, how to try and get in contact with these specific spirits, and that's what I did. And so that is something that with henbane, it's a relationship and a correspondence that I now personally have with henbane. So for example, belladonna, a personal correspondence that I have is miscarriage and death specifically, right? And being there, being kind of a little bit maternal in that sense. And that is going to be your personal UPG, unverified personal gnosis, that you can then of course compare to the common folklore and common correspondences that you will see in books and online. Now, if you are wanting to start creating things with these plants, if you want to start harvesting them, there's of course going to be books on that subject as well. Or for example, of course, the good old Spirit Flight ointment. I do have a dream ointment on our shop. It should be restocked this week, this coming week, once I've posted this video, which is just mugwort and wormwood and some, you know, like my own recipe essentially, right? So that doesn't include nightshades, but you can of course get into the traditional nightshade ointment, dream or flight ointment, spirit flight ointment. I do have an article about that on my Patreon if you want to read that, but that's a fascinating subject and nightshades were a part of that. And so that is something that you are able to then obviously look into once you are very much progressed with your relationship and you are much more, you know, comfortable with your relationship with the spirits. Now, I'm going to kind of get more into a little bit of a story time mode over here now. So these are kind of my experiences that I had and yeah, how these things went, because let me tell you, I've had some experiences with the nightshade plants and they were fascinating, but they also taught me a lot about respect. And whilst I have in theory, like I've kept reading about like you have to be really respectful with these plants, which obviously I understood, you know, I was like, of course I have to be like, of course I'm, you know, going to be really careful with these plants. I would never ingest them or anything like that. I would never just like mess around with them. Like that's just not something that I personally ever do. And so I knew that I had to approach these plants with a lot of respect, but I did not realize how individual the relationship would be, because I am very, very, very sensitive to these plants. Whereas I've talked to other people who they're able to like squish the belladonna berries in their fingers and it's fine. That would probably knock me out. So the first experience, I actually have these on my phone and they've happened only by, what's it called? By accident. And so that's obviously something that, you know, is it's dangerous, but at the same time, at this point, I've had so much theoretical knowledge and so much reading that I knew that the experiences that I had were more so interesting and not actually dangerous. Even though they were potentially uncomfortable, I knew that it's just a waiting game. It's fine, you know. I have also previously smoked weed, so I have had moments where I sometimes am uncomfortable with that too. And I know it'll subside, it's fine, you know, this is not going to harm me physically. This is just like an uncomfortable thing in this very moment. And that was with these plants as well. Now, the plants that I've had experiences with, and I will mention one thing at the end of this. The first one was datura, so devil's trumpet. Then the second experience was with belladonna, and then the third was with brugmansia, so angel's trumpet. I will say I've never had an experience with henbane. Henbane, I love henbane. Henbane's my baby. And I've never had an experience with henbane in that regard. I've only had spirit experiences with them, so that was really interesting. I will also quickly say the first experiences that I've ever had that were actually planned were with the flower essences. Now I do think I have, if not then I will be talking about how to make flower essences over on my Patreon. That's going to be up probably like in a week or two, but yeah. So my first experience was with datura. Now this was a really fascinating experience all around because this was on the 3rd of November 2023. I have it written down, and essentially this already started way before this because I already at this point had read about this plant extensively. I was like, oh, you know, devil's trumpet is so fascinating, so amazing. I would love to work with this plant, but I did not find seeds anywhere. I didn't find baby plants anywhere, so I was just like, all right. And then when we take our dogs for a walk, we walk past a field, and I remember that in that week specifically was really thinking a lot about datura and how I would love to work with this plant at some point, because I think at this point I already had my henbane plants, you know, from seed. I already had my brugmansia from seed. I don't think my belladonna yet from seed. I'm not sure, I don't quite remember. But I already had kind of a working relationship with some of these plants, but not with datura. I couldn't find datura. And then we go on a walk, a regular route, a regular dog walking route. I've walked past here like countless times, right? Since years we take this route. And what do I see in the field? I see this white flower. And I'm like, no. And so I quickly go into that field, and what is there? A datura plant. In bloom, mind you. And I'm like, no way. And so I connect in spirit where I basically am like, can I work with you? This is amazing. Like already the fact that it's right there on this field that we walk past, it felt a little bit like, hello, you know, it felt kind of like, yeah, I want to work with you too. And so I in spirit asked this plant, like, can I take you with me? Like, do you want to come home with me? I mean, you're coming home with me. And I got a positive response. And so what do? I go back home, I quickly get my shovel, and I'm out here on someone's field stealing this plant essentially, which was good because a couple of days later, the farmer had completely just like mowed the entire thing down. So that was really good. So I took him home. And yes, I do say him because I got a more masculine feeling from this plant. So I took him home, put him in a plant pot, and had him on the balcony area, and he looked beautiful. Bloomed at night, a most amazing smell. The smell was so intense. It was like almost like jasmine. Like such an intense smell, absolutely fragrant, gorgeous plant. And then obviously, you know, he started growing his seed pods, and they look really interesting. They kind of look like castagna chestnuts, you know, like the spiky ones. And then, you know, after a while, these pods I could see one of them started kind of like almost opening up, and I was like, okay, you're ripe, you're ready to harvest. And so what do? I harvest them, you know, I'm like out here with my little scissors, my little gloves, and I cut it and I take it off, and I'm like, oh, you know, cool. And then on this altar, I've got my plate, I've got my entire setup, I'm super careful, and I take my gloves off, and I'm like, oh, how do I get to these seeds? You know, I'm just gonna open up the thing like a chestnut and then get the seeds out. And obviously there's like a little bit of moisture. It's not the sap, of course, you know, I was very careful not to touch the sap. But I open up the seed pod and I can feel that there's a little bit of moisture. And I'm like, oh, whatever. I get out the seeds, taking pictures, and suddenly I'm like shaking. I can't hold my phone still. And I'll read to you the first experiences, because my mother and my aunt were sitting in the kitchen having coffee, and I go to them and I'm like, guys, I'm like so high. And like, they were like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I'm having a high feeling right now from this plant. I'm having an experience. Can you be my like hi buddy? Can you sit with me here and just like make sure that I'm okay? Because at this point it was coming on. It was so intense, and I was like so suddenly feeling really strong experiences. I immediately went to the mirror, I checked my pupils and everything, you know, I was like pink. I was like, my face was turning red, which is, by the way, there's this saying, I'm gonna put it on the screen because I cannot remember it, that if you are high from, not high, but like if you're having an experience with these plants, that's kind of like their symptoms essentially. And so my symptoms, I'll read them to you. My first things, because what I started doing then is, okay, I took my phone, I remembered how important it is to write these things down in case I needed a paramedic, in case I needed to go to the hospital, that I would be able to say, hey, this is exactly the experience that I'm having, this is how this happened, so that they would be able to help me. So I had a delirious, like a drunk high feeling. My hands started sweating, my hands started shaking. I was incredibly sensitive to touch. My senses were in general heightened, super sensitive to smell. My face was really red. I did experience clearer breathing, especially in the throat, which is interesting because datura, or thorn apple, which is also the name of it, is actually, or used to be used for treating asthma. And I have a slight asthma. I also had giddiness, so I was experiencing like a little bit of like a jolliness. I occasionally had heart race, so sometimes it would start racing, and then I am a very logical person, so I would be like, oh, okay, my heart is racing, let's count to 10, let's do a breathing exercise to get that back down so that I never started going into a panic. I had cold shivers and I had hot shivers. The effect lasted approximately 1 hour strongly, and I had mild effects still at 2 hours, so I still had clamped hands, slightly shaky, as if I was over-caffeinated. I did, and this was important for especially in case I needed paramedics, which I didn't need, but you know, I also told my mom this, of course, in case she needed to call someone. I washed my hands immediately. I immediately washed my hands, handling the seeds and noticing the effects. I drank 3 or 4 glasses of water and also had a toast with honey, because a toast with honey cures everything. But I didn't really have a lot of food in my system in general, so I had a lot of water and I had a little bit of bread. I had also not eaten and only had coffee, so I suspect that worsened the situation. So that was my experience with datura. This was definitely an initiation for me and a very memorable experience. Then I was really careful for a very long time handling these plants. Now, then my next one was belladonna. Now I have my beautiful 2 belladonna bushes, gorgeous. I am absolutely in love with them, right? They were going crazy with berries. I harvested some of them, by the way, you know, have them out for drying and everything for the seeds. But I did have an experience because I wanted to make a flower essence, and so I'm again out here in the middle of the night this time. It was a very special night and everything, you know, like important date and everything. I'm out here with my gloves on, cutting the belladonna leaves. That is what I needed, also some flowers. And so I bring them in, I'm on my working table, and then I take my gloves off. First I dab kind of the leaves dry with just some like tissue paper, and then I'm literally, what did I do? Yeah, I think I literally just like picked up one of the leaves to move it about or something like that, or to dab it a little bit more because I still saw like there was some water on it, but it was rainwater because it was a thunderstorm that night, which was in part why I picked that night to harvest belladonna. And I just dabbing the leaf, right? There's no sap, nothing. And then I'm basically, hold on, I'm writing down, and I actually have the experience written down in my grimoire as well. I am writing down exactly my methodology, right, for future reference for making this flower essence. And then I'm noticing that I can't write anymore. I couldn't write anymore. My hand was so shaky, I could not write a single letter. And then I take my phone out and I go to my husband and like, I'm having an experience again. And he's just like, he knows that I'm, you know, like I'm okay, like it's not gonna be a bad thing. It's just so that he realizes what is going on so that he can kind of keep an eye on me. And I'm with my phone and I'll read to you my experiences. So I touched the flower and leaf when wet, did not touch sap, did not have an open wound, leaf and flower were wet from rain. First sign was slightly itchy fingers. Immediately washed twice with soap, immediately drank water. So that's the thing. I remember actually before the shakiness, I had like that my fingers starting itching. Shaky hands, can barely write, slight eye, delirium, feeling of slowness and blurred vision. So kind of when, you know, you start looking around, it was a little bit like delayed. Very much heightened heart rate. More so probably than the Datura experience. Dry mouth, thirst. I remember that. I remember being so dry mouth suddenly. Like I really needed to drink water. Ever so slight headache. I had a slight headache. Effects already lessened after 10 minutes. Did not check for dilated pupils, but had slightly rosy cheeks. And that was what I thought was it. Then we go to sleep because it was already midnight. And I did write this, hold on, let me see when it says. Yes, so 26 minutes after midnight is when I had started writing these things down. Then we went to bed, because I'm out here thinking that everything's fine, you know, I brush my teeth, blah, 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 go to bed. And then at 1:09, I wake up suddenly. I had a heart rate spike, a weird surge of panic likeness. And I remember that. I remember having a little bit of like, almost like startledness, almost like panic, because I didn't expect it. I didn't expect to feel something again, you know, like the effects were gone. Why am I experiencing this again? And I will say that I had a little bit of an epiphany during this experience, especially because I was laying awake for quite a little bit after this still. But it was a really, really weird experience because again, I did not expect that. It was an accident. And that really was like, oh my gosh, I'm apparently incredibly sensitive to touch. And what was also interesting is that prior to this experience, I could always touch belladonna. I could, you know, kind of stroke her leaves. I could kind of like lift up the leaves, check for bugs, you know, out on the trees and everything, out in the bushes, and never had an experience. After this night, now, what is the weirdest thing is I can be near her and I'll start having a tiny little bit of, I don't know if this is like a placebo effect or anything. I mean, I always think placebo is magical in itself anyway, but now I can be near her or barely like stand close to her, and I'm starting to have a little bit of like an experience. So I don't know, it must have also been like a little bit of opening the gates for me, and I'm incredibly sensitive to belladonna now, which I don't mind. It makes it a little bit more difficult to take care of her in that sense, because I always have to make sure I've got my gloves and everything. But if anything, it actually is amazing because it almost felt like my intuition was like awoken a little bit more, and I'm very, very aware of belladonna now. And she's also a plant that I really love, like henbane and belladonna. I adore them. They are so important to me, and really, I love them, you know, like I have such a deep connection to them now. And then my third experience, this is pathetic. It's not pathetic, but this was just like, I remember being like, what the hell? So I have had my Brookmansia standing outside, you know, this was on the 9th of August. I am out here, I've got my Brookmansia standing outside, you know, she's loving the sun and everything, again in shade, but she's loving the warmth and everything, right? And I write I had wet hands from watering plants, and I collected the dead leaves off of the ground. And for a few seconds, because I collect the dead leaves, and I go to the bin and I throw them in the bin, and for a few seconds I had a noticeable heart rate increase, and it went away almost immediately. But I remember thinking, this cannot be serious. Like, these are dead leaves on the ground, and I picked them up and I'm immediately feeling that heart rate going up again. And you know, like the slight sort of, as if I had too much coffee. And yeah, so those are my experiences with these plants. I will say another technique that I really enjoy is of course the flower essence technique. I have my two here actually. Again, I am going to be putting flower essence sprays on my shop very soon, like this week essentially. So I have belladonna and I have henbane. So these are going to be on the shop. So look out for that if you are wanting to kind of work with these spirits in a safe way. I'll also be teaching a little bit of a class on my Patreon on how you can make your own flower essences, again in a safe way, and then how you are going to be able to use the flower essences. I'm just going to quickly pull out the books that I suggest for extra reading if this is something that you are interested in. So the first and most expensive book, I'm just going to get this out of the way really quickly because it is expensive. I'm not even sure if it is currently available at the moment. I bought it basically as soon as it got released. It's The Green Mysteries, Arcana Viridia, an Occult Herbarium by Daniel A. Schulke. This one's a chunky one. This one's a chunker, and it's gorgeous. First of all, the illustration. Oh, hold on, I have a plant in here. What is this? What are you? Who are you? All right. So the illustrations in here are gorgeous, but essentially this one is great. This one is huge. It does not obviously include every single plant. It does include the nightshades, which is quite rare for a lot of these plant books to contain because they are so dangerous and they're so, you know, like you should handle it with care, but this is an expensive enough book and a niche enough book that it includes this. This one is more of a compendium. This one is great if you quickly want to read about the correspondences or also his personal experiences with some of these, a little bit of folklore about these plants, and a couple of charms in here too. Now I'm gonna go into the book that started it all for me. If you want to get into this subject and you don't know which book to start with this one. This is Plants of the Devil. It's my favorite book ever. It is super small. It's by Three Hands Press. So I think you're able to get this on either Amazon, on their website directly, or if you just Google it, you'll be able to find it. You know, you'll be able to find a seller. But this one is a great little book, and this one really also beautiful. It's again, beautiful illustrations. It also is just an amazing resource. It's basically just folklore. And now it does not include exclusive content, as in like it's not exclusively about the nightshade plants, but it does include about the nightshade plants. But it's just really amazing to read about all of these different plants that you sometimes don't even think about, that are connected to the folkloric devil. And I love that. So this book is what really started it for me, and I suggest this one to everyone. In general, is general reading. Now we have the second book that I really started reading and really enjoyed with this. Also by Corinne Boyer, is The Witch's Cabinet, Plant Lore, Sorcery and Folk Tradition. Again, very folklore heavy, a lot of tabs. It does have some really great suggestions in here for, you know, things that I want to try out, essentially. I remember in here it had really great further reading and had a really great amount of, you know, just like things that you can implement into your own practice and getting deeper into the subject as well. So this one was really beautiful, and I love Corinne's work in general. Now, then the book that I also need to suggest, but I will say this one is a little bit difficult if you have, if you struggle with reading comprehension, or, you know, English is not your first language, or it's just a language that perhaps is not as easy for you to read, then, you know, take this with a grain of salt. Beneficium, Magic, Witchcraft and the Poison Path, second and revised edition by Daniel Schulke. So the first author as well, that green big one, this one as well. This one is probably also one of my favorite books. This one is amazing. The cover, this one is a little bit difficult to read in terms of the prose that the author is writing in. It's gorgeous though. It is a little bit more in depth about the nightshade plants as well, spirit flight and such topics. And it's just, this one is really, really deep. This one is, you have already read a lot about these different things from, for example, previous books. This one will really just blow your mind. This one really showed me how much of magic and witchcraft and poison arts are actually connected, and how a lot of times people in the past especially were accused of witchcraft because they were poisoners. So it kind of has like witchcraft, poison, you know, like it's almost like they were synonymous to a degree. Obviously not, there's a lot more nuance, you know, yada yada yada. But this book explains it all. It's so great. Again, Three Hands Press. I'm pretty sure you can again get this on Amazon, or just Google the title and you'll find it somewhere as well to purchase. Now, the next two, especially considering we were just talking about spirit flight, there's a couple more books about spirit flight in general. I keep promoting my Patreon here, y'all, but you know, that's how I make my money. I do have some articles, including reading suggestions on my Patreon about the spirit flight and spirit ointments, but one that I can definitely suggest is The Witch's Ointment, The Secret History of Psychedelic Magic by Thomas Hantzis. This one is a really, really great one as well. It's a good size, I would say. This one is by Park Street Press. And this one, great sources. This one talks more about the spirit ointment, spirit flight, the witch's sabbath, the different experiences that people kind of had that they talk about, and also the theories around these spirit ointments in general, the potential included ingredients that were potentially used, and just a lot of folklore surrounding spirit flight, the witch's sabbath, consorting with the devil, things like that. And again, of course, plants. And then the last one, which is also the most recent release, is The Charmer's Root, Witching Ways with Common Flora by Roger J. Horn. Now, again, definitely on Amazon. I'm pretty sure he self-publishes with Amazon. Don't quote me on that. I love his work in general. He's a great resource in all, you know, in all folkloric witchcraft ways. But this one is a little bit of similar to that big green one. To be honest, a little bit more in depth in certain areas. And this one does include nightshades as well. It doesn't have all of them. It's, keep in mind the size, you know. But this is a great one, especially if it also is something that you're curious about with, you know, seeking green spirits, working with these spirits, kind of how he explains how you can get into this path as well. So to be honest, this one probably is a good one to start with if you are new to this path and you are wanting to experience not just nightshade plants and the poison path, but in general want to work with the green spirits, as he says. I like that term, I'm gonna use that. So that one's a really, really great one to begin with as well. So that was already it. Again, if you would like to learn how to make your own floral essence, flower essence with these nightshade plants, head over to my Patreon. That video is going to be posted within a week or two, or potentially be built up as a class. I might just do both, we'll see. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I would love to hear your experiences, if you have any with the poison path, if you have any book suggestions, or if you have just anything to say, just leave it in the comments down below. Of course, if you would like to support my channel and me, again, I am going to be having these flower essences available on my shop as well. I also have a dream ointment on my shop if that's something that you're also interested in. And of course, in general, supporting my witchy shop is a great way to support this channel. And then of course my Patreon is a great way as well. And then if you would like to follow along for more, feel free to, you know, subscribe to my channel, turn on the notification bell, give it a like if you liked it. All my socials are linked below as well. And with that being said, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope I didn't yap your ear off too much, but yeah. Also, I am actually, quick side note, I'm also going to be uploading these, especially the very rambly ones, these videos over on my podcast, Folk Witchery. So you can find my podcast, Folk Witchery, over on Spotify or anywhere where you listen to podcasts. I'm going to be uploading a couple of episodes from my YouTube channel onto podcast format as well, if you prefer that in the future. I am also going to, of course, have a more traditional podcast style with guests, with co-hosts, and things like that. So keep an eye out for that. It is called Folk Witchery. I'll link that down below for you as well. So again, thank you so much for watching. May you walk with your gods. Bye.